There was a face outside the car window. We were going 75 miles per hour, and I was the only one that could see it. I don't know what else to say or do. I'm kind of freaking out right now. I'm writing this here because I need to empty these thoughts out before I go insane. Will I post it? I don't know. And it's not important. Right now, this draft is going to serve as my way of calming down. Let me start from the top and write down everything that's happened so far. My name is Casey. I live in the middle of nowhere, Florida, with my boyfriend Sean and my sister Lisa. We just got done visiting my parents in slightly less middle of nowhere, Florida. We had a good time, but ended up staying later than we should have, way later. I tried to convince Sean that we could just spend the night with them, but he felt like he was imposing. He's the type to avoid that at all cost, so he insisted on going home that night, and since we were Lisa's only ride home, she was dragged along too. So in the dead of night, around 11 p.m., we began the long 2-hour drive back home. Lisa has night blindness, and I, embarrassingly enough, don't have a driver's license, even at 22. So it was all on my poor boyfriend to drive us home. That's how we ended up in this situation, the three of us barreling down this empty country road in the dead of night, something straight out of a horror movie. We were about an hour into the drive when I first noticed it. Sean was focused on driving, and Lisa had fallen asleep, so I was left to my own devices. I had exhausted any entertainment my phone could give and turned a tired eye to the window. At first, I didn't see it. At first, I just thought it was my own reflection or Sean's or something appearing in the glass. It was hazy and distorted, like I was trying to look at something under rippling water, but the longer I stared, the more clear it became. What started as a pale, formless shape took on more clarity, like if it were emerging from the shadows to make itself known. Edges became more defined, features more apparent, a wisp of hair, the hollows of eyes, the bridge of a nose, the contours and shapes of a face. The second I realized it wasn't my reflection, I shot upright in my chair, my eyes going wide as I continued to gaze at the strange apparition. I blinked hard and rubbed my eyes, thinking I must have just been tired and seeing things, but when I opened them back up, it was still there, even clearer this time, though still too fuzzy for me to make it out clearly. But there was no ambiguity left in what it was. It was a face, a disembodied face that seemed locked to the window. It didn't bob like it was floating, or move like it was traveling separately from the car. It's like it was locked to the window, keeping perfect pace with us. We were going way too fast for anything to be doing that normally. My eyes quickly darted over to the speedometer, 75 miles per hour. And yet there it was, a face in the window. "Sean," I said, grabbing my boyfriend's arm. "Sean, what the fuck is that?" I held his arm for dear life, the hair on the back of my neck standing on edge. "What the fuck is what?" Sean asked in return, his eyes only briefly leaving the road to look in my direction. The thing in the window, what is that? It looks like a face. Sean took another glance at the window I was so horrified at. A longer one this time. But his eyes eventually returned to the road, and with a shrug he said, "I don't see anything." I was utterly shocked, and frankly kind of pissed off. The face wasn't exactly difficult to see, it was quite obviously there. Are you blind? It's right there. It's practically touching the glass. My head swiveled, darting back and forth between Sean and the face. I couldn't comprehend how he wasn't seeing it. Sean took one last look before shaking his head. "Babe, there's seriously nothing there. Are you sure it's not just your reflection?" I started to get angry by this point. I slapped his arm, which elicited a pained yelp from him. "Do you think I don't know what my own reflection looks like?" "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't see anything." Exasperated and annoyed, I turned back to the window and locked eyes with the creepy face once again. I stared at it long and hard, really double-checking to make sure I wasn't just seeing things, but I wasn't. It was there. The details were hazy, but it was there. It couldn't be Sean's reflection, because he wasn't facing the window, and it didn't follow my head when I moved. The face had become even clearer in the past minutes. I could make out more of it now. More of its entire head. It looked misshapen. Something was wrong about its shape somehow. My heart was starting to pound. Fear was gripping my heart. What was this thing? Was I just losing my mind? My sister must have woken up from our shouting, because I heard her stirring in the back seat before she let out a bleary yawn and leaned forward, arms on the backs of our chairs, head leaned forward between them. "What are you two yelling about? Are we home yet?" she mumbled, still groggy and tired. "No, we've still got another hour," Sean replied. "Cassie is just seeing things." My sister turned to me with a raised eyebrow. "I am not seeing things. It's right there, Lisa, look." I leaned back in my chair to let her get a look at the window. "Do you see it? In the window?" Lisa stares into the glass, narrowing her eyes and leaning forward. "No, I give up. What am I looking for?" I dropped my head into my hands. Frustrated and scared, Sean and Lisa tried to comfort me, but I wasn't having it. I didn't know why I could see it and they couldn't. Was I genuinely having some kind of breakdown? I kept my head down for a while, eyes shut tight, not making a sound aside from the occasional whimper. I think I must have dozed off at some point, because I startled awake sometime later from the jostling of the car over a pothole. At first I wondered if it could have been a dream, but I could feel it. I could feel its gaze from the window, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I didn't want to look, I didn't, but I had to. It felt like I was being compelled, like something was yanking me towards it, forcing me to look. Morbid curiosity? Or was it something else? I finally stole a glance at the window against my better judgment. It was still there, and now it was even more clear than before. I could make out more details that I couldn't last time. Raw red skin, blood oozing from exposed muscle tissue on its face, burn marks on its charred scalp, hair that still singed with fire. I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry and scream and get out of this car, but my panic was put on hold as I noticed something else. The face was rapidly becoming clear, faster than before. It was coming into focus so fast I could watch in real time as its full face emerged from the haze. I was glued to it, unable to tear my eyes away. It's like I was paralyzed. My eyes opened so wide, they practically hurt. As we passed by mile marker 428, the face finally gained its full appearance. For just a moment, it became perfectly crystal clear, only at that very spot, before it quickly began to fade away back in a blurry mess, fading quickly as though to just give me a quick peek, but that one glance was more than enough. The face had revealed itself in full to me, a gruesome deformed mess. I could make it out with complete clarity. The side of its head smashed in, caved through like a collapsed building. Blood seeped through torn hair that was scorched black by fire. The face itself was raw and red, skin almost completely torn away, leaving nothing but bleeding, burning tissue and exposed bone. Its nose was torn away, and one eye was completely missing, leaving nothing but a grotesque and empty socket, its mouth full of broken, shattered, and bloodied teeth. The face was so horribly deformed that I couldn't even make out if it was a man or a woman. It barely even looked human at this point. I finally lost control of myself. My stomach heaved and I vomited all over my lap and the floor of Sean's car. The next few minutes were a chaotic blur of shouting and puking. I vaguely remember Sean pulled over onto the side of the road and got out of the car. I tried to plead to him to just keep going, to ignore me and drive, but he stubbornly refused. I couldn't stop from retching long enough to argue. I watched with dismay and horror as he walked around to my side of the car, the face still blurry in the window, and yanked the door open, and it was gone. The face was no longer in the window. That was 2 days ago. I had written it off until now as just a hallucination or a dream. It didn't really make all that much sense, but it was better than the alternative. I was perfectly content to seal the memory away and live on in blissful ignorance. But that little delusion was shattered just a few hours ago. I got a call from my mother. Lisa had been in a terrible, terrible car accident this morning. The wreck was so bad that they were having to drive out to identify her body. The police said she was barely recognizable from the injuries. That would have been bad enough until they told me where the wreck happened, right next to mile marker 428. I'm avoiding seeing her body at all costs because I'm so scared that if I see my sister now, I'll know who that face really belonged to. It started with small things, as these realizations often do, not dramatic, not obvious, just small shifts that you'd dismiss if you weren't paying attention. The clock on the wall at work seemed faster than usual, ticking along with a smug urgency. My phone rang, but no one was there, just silence that stretched long enough to make me hang up. Nothing worth mentioning, right? That's what I told myself. But then it became harder to shake. Last Tuesday, I walked into my usual bakery. The bell above the door gave its familiar chime, and the air smelled of sourdough and burnt coffee. Normal, comfortable. I ordered my usual, a black coffee, no sugar, and a croissant, but the cashier, someone I'd seen dozens of times, looked at me with a blank stare when I asked. "We don't sell croissants," she said. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Since when?" She blinked, her face neutral, and shrugged. "We never have." The strangest part wasn't her response. It was that the other customers seemed unfazed, like they hadn't heard anything unusual. I glanced at the menu on the wall, searching for evidence, and sure enough, no croissants. I left without my coffee. By Thursday, the strangeness had begun to snowball. I passed my neighbor in the hallway, an older man who always wore the same scuffed brown shoes. I'd see him almost daily. We'd nod in acknowledgement, but never talk. That day, though, he wore sneakers, brand new ones, bright white, laced too tightly. "New shoes?" I asked. Surprised I'd even spoken. He stopped, looked down at his feet, and frowned. "I've always had these," he said, as if correcting a child. I didn't reply. I didn't know how to. That night, I scrolled through photos on my phone, trying to ground myself. They felt off, though I couldn't pinpoint why. A picture from a trip I took last year only. I didn't remember being there. Another of me with friends at a birthday party I swear I didn't attend. Every photo was like that, familiar yet not mine. By Sunday, I avoided people entirely. Conversations felt like walking into a room and forgetting why you came. A friend called to check on me, something about missing dinner plans I didn't remember making. I apologized, my voice strained, but she brushed it off too easily, like she wasn't listening at all. I stayed home after that. The news became unbearable. Headlines blurred into nonsense, shifting in meaning every time I blinked. A story about rising fuel prices would become a report on invasive species by the time I refreshed the page. Even the weather, simple, predictable, felt wrong. The rain fell noiselessly like a movie with the sound muted. Last night, it all came to a head. I opened my journal, hoping to write everything down. I needed clarity, proof that I wasn't unraveling. But when I flipped through the pages, the handwriting wasn't mine. The words on the earlier entries, things I'd written weeks, even months ago, were unfamiliar, almost cryptic. "It's slipping," one line read. Another said, "Look closer." I stared at those two words. Look closer at what? Today, it hit me. The moment of realization wasn't grand or cinematic. It was quiet, like a final puzzle piece clicking into place. I was pouring cereal when I noticed the box wasn't the same brand I'd been buying for years. The milk smelled like oranges, and then, as if my mind had been waiting for this exact detail to unlock, everything shifted. The kitchen light felt colder, harsher. The floor seemed closer than it should be. My hands, steady moments before, trembled as I gripped the counter. This isn't real. Not the cereal, not the milk, not my kitchen, not me. You think this is a story, don't you? Some cleverly crafted little anecdote to pass the time. But that's the problem. You're reading this, and that means you're part of it too. Maybe you've noticed it, how the days feel shorter, the moments thinner, the gaps in your memory, the ones you blame on being tired or busy. Look around, look closer. Do the faces you see every day seem complete? Does your life fit together in a way that feels solid? Or is it just convincing enough to keep you from asking questions? And here's the thing, if I'm not real, neither are you. I've worked at my local library for almost 3 years now. It's nothing glamorous. Small town, dusty stacks, and the faint smell of mildew no matter how much Febreze you spray. I work the closing shift most nights, which usually means I spend hours alone with nothing but bookshelves and my headphones. But last week, I found something I can't explain. I was doing my usual end-of-shift routine, locking up, making sure nobody was hiding in the bathroom stalls, and checking the basement archives. While down in the basement, I noticed something strange. One of the old metal shelves was slightly crooked, leaning out at an angle. At first, I thought it was just warped from age, but when I pushed on it, the whole thing shifted backward. Behind it was a narrow, dark passageway. I stood there for a while, trying to convince myself not to go in. I even told myself it was probably just an old utility closet, but my curiosity got the better of me. The passage led to a small windowless room. The walls were lined with small wooden bookshelves. They were packed with books I'd never seen before, leather-bound, old with no titles on the spines. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling barely lit the space, but I could see enough to know these books were much older than anything they have upstairs. I pulled one off the shelf at random. It was heavy, and the cover was unmarked except for a single embossed symbol that looked like an eye. The pages were filled with dense handwriting, diagrams, and strange illustrations. The title on the first page read, "Practical Applications of the Unseen." I flipped through trying to make sense of it. Most of it was gibberish, equations that didn't add up, sentences written in languages I couldn't identify, but there were instructions too, written in English. One section caught my attention, to glimpse beyond the veil. The instructions were simple. Light a candle, place a mirror at a 45-degree angle, and recite the words printed below. It sounded ridiculous, like some creepypasta ritual from the early 2000s, but I was alone in a library, so why not? I brought the book upstairs, grabbed a hand mirror from the lost and found box, and lit one of the emergency candles we kept at the front desk. I set it all up on a reading table and began to read the words aloud. At first, nothing happened. I felt stupid, sitting there chanting in a dead silent library. But then the room got colder. The candle's flame flickered violently, even though there was no draft. I looked into the mirror and froze. Behind my reflection, something moved. It wasn't clear at first, just a dark shape shifting in the background. I turned around, but there was nothing behind me. When I looked back into the mirror, the figure was closer, tall, with long, twisted limbs that bent in ways they shouldn't. Its face was indistinct, like static on an old TV, but I could feel it watching me. I dropped the mirror, it shattered on the floor, and the thing was gone. The candle's flame steadied, and the room warmed up. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, my imagination running wild, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. Now every night at the library, I feel like I'm being watched. The shadows between the shelves seem darker, heavier. Sometimes when I'm closing up, I hear faint whispers coming from the basement. The worst part? A few days ago, I found another book from that hidden room. Not in the basement, but on a return cart upstairs. I'm the only one who knows about that room, and I sure as hell didn't bring it up. I went back to the hidden room the next night. I told myself it was to put the book back, but I couldn't resist opening another one. This one was thinner, its cover marked with a spiral. Inside were instructions for something called the listening ritual. I know it sounds stupid, but by performing this ritual, I can banish whatever I summon with the last one. What do you guys think I should do? I've spent 20 years trying to understand what happened to my sister that autumn, and I'm no closer to an answer. Sometimes I wonder if that's the point, that some experiences aren't meant to be understood from the outside, only witnessed, like watching someone you love have a conversation in a language you don't speak, except the other participant is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Emma and I were staying at our grandmother's farmhouse in western Maine that October, helping clear it out after she passed. The property had been in our family for generations, perched on the edge of an apple orchard that had gone wild decades ago. The trees were gnarled and untamed, their branches reaching toward the house like arthritic fingers. We'd been close once, Emma and I, but life has a way of putting distance between people. She'd moved to Seattle for work while I'd stayed in Boston. We saw each other at holidays, traded occasional texts, but that was it. When we inherited the farmhouse together, it was the first time we'd spent more than a day in each other's company in years. The first few days were ordinary enough. We sorted through old photographs, argued about which pieces of furniture were worth keeping, and remembered summer visits when we were kids. But something changed after we found the box of letters in the attic. They were love letters written to our grandmother in 1943 by a young man named Thomas Wheeler. He'd grown up on the neighboring farm and enlisted after Pearl Harbor. The last letter It wasn't until the night of the storm that I started doubting Uncle Frank was really my uncle. He'd been around my whole life, a quiet, stoic man who smelled faintly of cigars and pine. When I was younger, he'd come to family gatherings, always standing in the background, smiling faintly while sipping his drink. My parents told me he was my dad's older brother, and I didn't question it. Why would I? Families are strange that way. Sometimes people just show up and stay. But that stormy night, alone in my parents' creaky old house, something changed. It started with the power going out. A sharp crack of thunder shook the walls, and the lights blinked out, leaving me in thick, oppressive darkness. I lit a few candles and sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone until the battery began to die. The only sound was the wind howling outside, rattling the windows. I almost didn't hear the knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, Uncle Frank. His face was pale and his clothes were drenched. "A storm knocked my car into the ditch," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Mind if I stay until it clears?" Of course, I couldn't say no. He was family, or so I thought. As the hours crept by, something about Uncle Frank's behavior unsettled me. He barely spoke, just sat in the armchair by the window, staring out into the darkness. His lips moved silently, as if he were muttering something to himself. I couldn't shake the feeling he was watching me, even when his eyes were fixed elsewhere. Trying to distract myself, I rummaged through an old photo album, flipping through pictures of family vacations and holidays. Then I stopped. My finger hovered over an image of a Christmas gathering from 10 years ago. There was Uncle Frank, standing in the background as always, wearing that same faint smile. But something was off. He looked exactly the same, not similar, identical. Same face, same clothes, same posture. I flipped to another page, a summer barbecue. Uncle Frank again, holding a beer, standing at the edge of the group. His hair hadn't changed, nor had his lined face. He didn't look older or younger. He looked frozen. My heart started to race. As I closed the album and glanced over at him, he was still sitting there, but now he was staring directly at me. His lips stopped moving. "You've been looking at those pictures for a long time," he said, his voice low and calm. Too calm. I stammered something about how much I loved old family photos, but he didn't respond. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the mantel above the fireplace. His movements were slow, deliberate. "You know," he said, picking up an old clock my mom loved. "This house used to belong to my brother." He turned to face me, his smile stretching wider than I'd ever seen. "But I don't have a brother, never did." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? My dad?" "Your dad doesn't know me," he interrupted. "Never did. I'm not part of your family, kiddo. Never have been." I tried to laugh, to brush it off as a joke, but the words wouldn't come. My body felt cold. He stepped closer, and I noticed his skin was unnaturally pale, his eyes glassy and dull like a doll's. "You invited me in, though," he continued, tilting his head, "and I've been waiting for that a long, long time." The candles flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. I scrambled for my phone, but it was dead. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could hear him, his slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer. "I've been here before, you know," he whispered, his voice unnervingly close. "Every generation, I find a way back in. Just needed someone to let me in again." A sharp gust of wind blew through the house, slamming doors and sending papers flying. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. He laughed, a deep guttural sound that didn't belong to Uncle Frank or to anything human. "Not your uncle," he said, his voice now layered with something otherworldly, something ancient. "Not even close." And then he was gone. The storm ended the next morning, and when my parents came home, I told them everything. They laughed, of course, and said I must have been dreaming, but when I pulled out the photo album to show them the picture of Uncle Frank, every image of him was gone. All that remained were empty spaces where he'd once stood.